This video is brought to you in part by Squarespace. Dark Beginnings, like the game it's promoting, turned out to be far more than anyone was initially expecting. Instead of just another short, we got 3 whole episodes that were admittedly very short on their own. Each release still packed quite the punch, and I'll get into those details very shortly because, as you'll soon see, this video is a compilation of my previous coverage of the 3 separate chapters, now all conveniently put together. And like Dark Beginnings, now that we have the full coverage compiled, I've also added a bit of extras myself. Outside of this new opening, I'm also going to talk about the added scenes and the animatic once this is all said and done. Won't be very long, but if you do want to just see the new stuff I've added, you can just skip ahead to this timestamp. Otherwise, enjoy. Before we carry on, I want to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Jumping online and building up your own brand was always an intimidating thing for me, but Squarespace makes that a streamlined, fast, and easy process, all while making you look good thanks to their Fluid Engine, a next-generation website design tool that lets you tweak any of their many templates with easy-to-use drag-and-drop tools. And I don't need to tell you how useful websites can be, whether you want to build up a portfolio of your work, an art gallery, or a shop, because yes, they have everything you need to run your own online business, including analytics that help show you the strongest avenues of growth and help you build up marketing strategies, which include integration with your favorite social media networks. And they can even help you set up an online shop to sell and distribute custom merch. All you have to do is design it and they'll handle production, inventory, and shipping. Really doesn't get any easier than that. And to make it just a bit easier, if you use my link, squarespace.com/gameapologist, you'll get 14 days for free, which is plenty of time to see if this is right for you. And when you want to make a purchase, that same link will get you 10% off your first order. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring the video. Sonic X Shadow Generations Dark Beginnings has finally dropped. God, what a mouthful. It was a bit later in the day than anyone was expecting, but if you've been on this channel long enough, you know I have no room to criticize. And regardless, it was well worth the wait. In 6 minutes, they managed to show off some top-tier animation, touch on and recanonize little bits of lore, yet still take things in directions I don't think anybody was quite expecting. And they really showed us why Shadow is such a beloved character in this franchise. And this is only part 1 of 3, so that's what we're talking about today. Unless, of course, you're watching this in the inevitable compilation I make of all 3 episodes. If that's the case, hello to you future folks. For those of you who have not yet seen Dark Beginnings, again, it's 6 minutes. Just go watch it. This video is simply here to gush and keep conversations going. I'm too excited not to talk about it. Whenever I'm asked what my favorite Sonic cartoon is, most people expect me to say something like Sonic SatAM, considering I grew up in that era and I defend the freedom fighters as hard as I do, or maybe Sonic Boom for the laid-back, low-stakes humor. But truth be told, I think these animated shorts we've been getting these last few years have easily been the best of the bunch. There's a reason why everyone demands a whole show is made out of whatever thing we're watching at the time. They're all radically different from each other, but they all work brilliantly, taking on different tones to represent whatever game or character they're following. Sonic Mania Adventures is genuinely charming and funny. The Knuckles short for Frontiers was appropriately somber, and those little Chow cartoons were adorable. And Dark Beginnings nails just about everything you'd want if you are a fan of Shadow. Unlike most of the other shorts, which were brought to us by Powerhouse Animation, Beginnings is brought to us by Studio Gigex. Hopefully I'm saying that right. But anyway, yeah, they did a great job with the animation, and the writing was also top tier, and that's no surprise because this was put together by none other than Ian Flynn, who was probably appreciating the chance to finally show off what he can do with Shadow. I still get people complaining about how the Hedgehog was handled in the Metal Virus in my recap video. I can't imagine what the actual writer has to put up with, and I think it's very clear that everyone who put this animation together not only has a deep passion for their job, but also for the subject matter. I was a little worried that the 3D modeling would cheapen the experience, but I have to admit they utilized it brilliantly. The dynamic shots of the fight between Emerald and Shadow, the long hallway shots, the surreal transitions, they really made the right call with 3D animation. The scripting, storyboarding, and again the animation, it's all top tier. And the tone of the piece is appropriately somber and action-packed all at the same time, with splashes of the soundtrack hitting hard, but also knowing when to keep quiet when they really need to let a scene do what it needs to do. This is how you remember Sonic X. This is the kind of thing fans want when they're asking for a new Sonic anime. It has all the cues of traditional adult-oriented anime in all of the right spots. That's all to say, yes, this cartoon is real pretty. The voice work also impressed me. I've never been too big of a fan of Kirk Thornton's take on Shadow, but the dude is a seasoned pro. He's got to do what he's directed to do, and we don't have that same sneering, sinister tone you'd hear from Shadow and Sonic Boom and the like. He takes on a softer tone when speaking with Maria and a more serious one as the story carries on. There's a lot of layers to this performance. Quite the shift considering how jarring it was the first time I heard Kirk's voice in the original release of Sonic Generations. Maria, who is voiced by Stephanie Sheh, also does a solid job. I've not liked a lot of the overly syrupy, sweet takes on the character, as I've heard in the past, and this take still kind of is, but that's also the point of the character, and it's not over the top or obnoxious. She does a really good job. And it's nice to have some things explained about the character, such as the low gravity of the arc helping keeping her condition in remission. If that was explained in Shadow 2005 or some random Japanese guidebook, I don't know. Point is, you don't have to go searching for those little clues. They're putting it right up front. And it's nice to see Maria and Shadow interact a bit more to better understand why Shadow loves her so much. But I will say, for an episode titled Shadow and Maria, there is not a whole lot of Maria. Once Shadow is shown the Aurora Borealis, Emerald pops onto the scene, and that's about all the time the Hedgehog and the girl get together. I will note again, they had the courage to just call this planet Earth. Yes, I know it's not Mobius, but it's better than Sonic's world. And that's not the only thing they're going to firmly establish either, but more on that later. I was actually expecting Emerald to play a bigger part than what he did, but I think that was sort of the point of the marketing. Just like we saw in the teaser, once the robot arrives, he swaps fisticuffs with Shadow and the fight is fantastic. Sirs pointed out to me that they're actually using moves from Sonic Battle, which is a lovely little detail, and another is seeing Emerald use the spin dash only after Shadow did it first, subtly showing that the robot is copying abilities. And you can see that play out as he mirrors moves from Shadow in the fight. It's really, really cool. But as the fight quickly plays out, Shadow goes in for a punch and instead shatters a giant pane of glass, indicating to us that this isn't really happening. Emerald isn't the central antagonist, he's just a memory, one long since past. We had a hint of that right before Shadow confronted the robot once he touched Maria's hand, seeing a quick glimpse of her grim fate. So that's really interesting, and it gets wilder from here. After the Emerald fight, we get a cool, surreal trip through other traumatic memories, such as Gerald's holding cell, making a brilliant use of SA2 imagery that was haunting back in the original game, and it turned it into something truly nightmarish, with yet another long hallway scene, one that extends away from Shadow as he reaches out to save the professor, symbolizing how futile it is. This is the past after all. This already happened. There's nothing Shadow can do to save Gerald. I was also so proud of them for reestablishing that yes, this little girl was indeed gunned down, as we see her get cloud-capped in a thunderstorm, which also gave us a hint of Black Doom's return. And that finally brings us to the present day, with Shadow standing next to a tree on a hillside, very similar to the opening cutscene of his titled game. And then we look up to show us that yes, the moon is still blasted apart like it was at the end of Sonic Adventure 2. Now, how they explain the moon being full elsewhere, I'm not really too worried about it, and I can't imagine a lot of fans who care about the lore are going to care that much either, because let's be real, they really just wanted to see some lasting impact from their favorite games. If you're honed into the canon of the franchise, it's likely you're caring a whole lot about Shadow. The introduction of Knuckles and Angel Island really started kicking off some proper world building, but Knuckles' story was more interesting on a grander scale, with ancient civilizations and the like. Shadow's story is still grand, but it was a lot more personal, and watching the effect he had on the world around him is what kept a lot of fans coming back. So it was nice to see that they aren't only reestablishing a lot of his character, but his impact on the world, which again is firmly established as Earth, and also reestablishing a more literal impact on the moon. I also like that the Ark is still up there, a Robotnik face forever looming in the planet's orbit. It does kind of remind me of Fleetway's version of the Death Egg, at least early on. I've not read all of Fleetway yet. They established that the space fortress had been abandoned and just sat in orbit, and I thought that was a really cool concept. I don't know, abandoned space stations are just really neat, and I've always loved the Death Egg, but I do think the Ark is a little cooler. It's not a blatant Star Wars ripoff, and it has a better name. It also actually does something worthwhile, and again, I think that's why a lot of fans are going to be excited to see that the moon is nice and busted here. I really like the extra touch of the debris floating around. If nothing else, I hope that particular piece shows up more often in Sonic games going forward. These 6 minutes really took us on a trip and messed with expectations, establishing a bit of mystery and planting the seeds of something I think is going to be really special. This is ultimately a promotional piece leading up to the launch of a new game, but man, this is such a step up from the little tie-in comics they'd slap in at the end of Archie issues. Speaking of, the one made for the original Sonic Generations was written by Ian Flynn, and look how far we've come. I'm still not sure if there's going to be much here that's going to be radically different when it's all said and done, both for Shadow or for the world as a whole. From the sounds of what I'm seeing, I feel like this cartoon and the game is going to put Shadow back on track, much like Frontiers did for Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, revisiting old memories and coming to terms with some demons. And going by some parallels I'm seeing between this and some concepts Ian Flynn put out there for Archie Shadow, it might be worth revisiting some of those stories as well. It looks like Shadow will be tempted by Black Doom to go back in time and alter the fate of Maria, only to ultimately have to decide that she has to die. Which, I mean, hey, they had Flash do that, so maybe this is how they get that DC crossover rolling. But seriously, it probably won't be anything too drastic, probably reestablishing Shadow's connection with Team Dark, getting to say goodbye properly to his lost family, and also, on a broader note, this and the game will probably give some of these edgy bad guys a chance to actually stand out in some proper media for a change. But I don't want to speculate too much. Right now, I kind of just want to enjoy the ride and see where this goes, because man, this was incredible, and we've only just gotten started. Every time they come out with a new cartoon, you're gonna see fans all over saying that they need to make a full, proper series. And yes, this is why people get so impatient with the likes of Sonic Prime, because we know what we can really pump out from this franchise if there are the proper people backing it up. I'm glad we're all hyped for the movie. I'm excited for that new skin, but I don't want another Knuckles show, and when this is all said and done, I really want them to start jumping more into animation. If you put out stuff at this level of quality, it doesn't even need to stay at the same tone. It doesn't need to always be dark, but this level of quality will bring in new fans. Part 2 of Dark Beginnings is here, and it's even shorter than Part 1. Clocking in at 4.5 minutes, and a minute of that is credits. But man, what a 3.5 minutes that was. Re-establishing a long-forgotten character and embracing a beloved team dynamic, all while giving us yet another stunning fight scene. And it released at a reasonable time. Good job, guys. Things kick off 50 years ago on the Ark. Unlike Part 1, where present-day Shadow was experiencing all of his memories firsthand, this time is actually a proper flashback. As we see Maria walking down a hallway and opening a door, and as she crosses the threshold, another child runs across her path, one sporting two different colored eyes. What's that term again? Heterochromia. I could have just wrote that into my script and pretended I was real smart instead of having to look it up. Cyrus is one of my best friends. He literally has this condition and I can't. Anyway, this is Abe, otherwise known as the Gun Commander from Shadow's 2005 game, yelling at Maria to keep that freak away from him. That freak, of course, being Shadow, who is looking at a Starro. A Black Arms alien. Specifically, a Death Leech. Or, as he calls it here, a larva. I wonder if that's been established prior to this cartoon. If we're getting a hierarchy of the Black Arms aliens, that would be pretty neat. Anyway, yeah, Shadow is staring at this thing looking disturbed, and Maria approaches the hedgehog asking how he is. He says he's fine, but obviously there's more going on here. He tells Maria that he was created from the same DNA as this larva, an ugly, heartless creature, and even though he looks like a hedgehog, he's really no different from this thing. Really like that line. That was really cool. I always thought the alien stuff was kind of stupid, but hey, since it's here, you might as well make it as rad as possible. This line, of course, causes Maria to react with a hug, telling Shadow that is simply not true. Unlike the larva, Shadow does have a heart. Even if he has a hard time expressing his feelings, deep down he really cares. And I like that that's how Maria describes Shadow. Gets so many fans talking about how he's mischaracterized, and I don't exactly disagree with a lot of them, but he's a complicated guy, and he has a hard time expressing his heart. And all of this is overheard by Abe. Now, this is a reference to Abe overhearing all the craziness from Shadow's creation in Shadow's title game, but what's more interesting here is his name. I had to go look this up just to be sure, and now I've seen it all over Twitter, so if you've been on that hellscape today, you probably already know this, or if you've read the comics, you already know this, but the commander from Shadow 05 never got a proper name, but he did in Archie. Now, I don't know if Ian Flynn came up with a name or if he sourced it from Sega. I'm sure he'll tell us as soon as he's allowed to, but the point is, the first time we've ever seen this character name in any any official piece of Sonic media was in an Archie comic. See kids, it's not so bad when you take elements from other canons. Sometimes you get real cool stuff. So hate on haters, this cartoon would not exist without the Archie series, and we are all the better for it. Now before we jump back to the present, there are a lot of interesting things happening in this first scene. Just like Tails Tube and the like, this is firmly re-establishing the lore of Shadow's title game. And not only that, they're adding some new wrinkles to it. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think this is the first time we've heard that Shadow knew about his connections to the Black Arms in the past. That's a big deal because he was unaware of this connection until it was explained to him by Black Doom in his title game. This animation confirms that Shadow was aware of how he was created, and that's not really any kind of a plot hole since Shadow did have amnesia at the start of his 2005 game. Still, that is pretty interesting. I'm also curious to know what happened to cause Abe to be so upset with Shadow right before Maria came into the room. Did the larva cause a reaction out of Shadow? That wouldn't be too far off the table from the Archie storyline where Shadow's alien DNA was activated, a story that was written by Ian Flynn, who is both the writer of this story and Shadow's campaign in the upcoming game. Or maybe it's a reference to a cutscene in Shadow's game I'm not remembering. I haven't replayed it yet, but stick around, I'll be streaming it soon. I also thought it was interesting that even on the arc, it sounds like Shadow is trying to figure himself out. Maria says he's having a hard time finding answers, which seemed weird to me at first. Gerald is his creator, and he was open enough about the alien DNA business. What other mysteries is Shadow trying to uncover? Is it maybe that Shadow was once originally just a black hedgehog that was experimented? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. So many people got mad at me for even playing with that idea of a classic Shadow. I was just trying to figure out how it could work in canon. You guys get mad at the weirdest things. More seriously, I don't think Shadow's actually trying to find more answers out about his past. I've not read the manga yet, but I've seen a lot of translated images showing Shadow frustrated at his failure of being a wonder drug. So maybe it's Shadow trying to figure out his place here in the present and what he's going to do in the future. In part 1, he did say he wasn't sure if he'd have a place on Earth, so that would line up. That's not something that's ever been completely clear in the Sonic franchise. We've never had a firm idea of what he actually wants to do with his life. Hopefully after this animation and the game, we'll have a better idea of exactly that. Right now, it looks like Maria is his only real connection. She does understand him. She can read his feelings even better than he can for himself. They're doing a great job establishing their connection and why they are important to each other, and also why Shadow would have a hard time connecting with others. But Maria, supportive as ever, ends the scene alluding to Shadow making other relationships. And with that, we cut back to the present, where we see Shadow attacking an Eggman base filled with Shogun-themed egg pawn. And this fight is insane. Quite frankly, this is some of the most beautiful animation I have ever seen for this franchise, and it's about damn time someone gave that Sonic CD opening a run for its money. And even though Shadow is doing just fine against these robots, yeah, no, I saw it too, I'm not gonna comment about it, their day gets even worse as Rouge and Omega join the fight as well. Yes, we finally have the return of Team Dark. I love seeing the different styles of fighting between these three characters. Shadow just charges into the base like it's nothing and ruthlessly takes out these robots, moving so fast you barely even see what he's doing. Like taking a sword and then chucking it back at the pawn's face. Oh my god! And Omega showing up and just raining bullets on these guys. Oh, it's so good. Ian Flynn has always had a blast writing Omega, and it's wonderful to see the character actually speaking from a Flynn script. He doesn't get much to say, at least in part 2, but man, he is fantastic with the couple of quips he does get in. And Rouge comes in next with a wonderful entrance backlit by the moon. Still broken, by the way. I wonder if that's a Batman reference. I mean, that DC stuff is coming soon after all, but even if it's not, who cares? This is a wonderful reintroduction of the Bat, and just like Shadow, her voice works a lot better here than what we've seen somewhat recently. I'm thinking of Sonic Dream Team. And I'm also just a fan of Omega's voice overall. Always thought it was too high-pitched, like it needed a deeper, angrier tone. Well, as angry as a robot can sound anyway, and he sounds excellent here. Now, while this is the return of Team Dark, this animation does confirm that Shadow doesn't work for Gun, which I know was said in interviews, but here it shows us that this meetup was not planned. Rouge is here on behalf of Gun, and Omega is backing her up, and they just so happen to run into Shadow, who is here to track down a spacecraft to return to the Ark, as he's worried the Black Arms have returned. Also, he quickly saves Rouge, and I think that's the third time he saved her ass now. And after they're done wiping out the pawns, they have to take on an Egg Breaker. This was a boss boss in Shadow the Hedgehog, but that was a mech driven by Eggman. This is now a Super Badnik, but not its first appearance, as it did show up in the IDW series, specifically in the Imposter Syndrome miniseries, also written by Ian Flynn. Remember, this is only 3 minutes long, and we're getting some really deep fun cuts here. Anyway, even if Rouge, Shadow, and Omega aren't always officially a trio, it's clear these three know how to work well together, with Shadow naturally taking the lead, and after another splashy bit of animation, the breaker is broken. Also wanted to note, I love the detailing on the Eggman neon here. I don't know why that stood out to me. It's such a commonplace background piece in Sonic games, and this animation just, I don't know, it made it a little bit more tangible, giving it a little bit more three-dimensional space. I guess simply from seeing where the bulbs actually connect. I don't know, I just love the little details. It just looks nice. Yeah, so it turns out that this is just a supply depot. No spaceship here, but it makes sense that Shadow would check this place out specifically, as this is Pyramid Cave from Sonic Adventure 2. Or maybe it's just another Eggman pyramid. Maybe Shadow just thinks all pyramids have spaceships in them. Who knows? Everything wraps up with Rouge saying that she will take Shadow to a ship if he does something for her in return. And that is go to Sonic's birthday party. This was such a jarring and obvious way to tie this into Sonic Generations. I'm sure there was a more natural way to do it, but who cares? This was really funny. If nothing else, it shows the tonal difference between these two campaigns. And I have enjoyed how other fans have ran with this one line, how it subtly shows a connection between Sonic and Rouge. A lot of folks have established them as kind of a sibling vibe. I don't know, I think it's really cute. Also think it's kind of sweet that Rouge is just trying to force Shadow to socialize. You know, now that I say it out loud, I guess the overall point of this tiny video was Shadow establishing connection, so hey, that thematically comes back around fairly nicely. It's just weird to talk about birthday parties in the middle of a military base. But hey, they were looking for a spaceship in a pyramid to go up to a broken moon, so whatever. I completely forgot that I'm talking about an anthropomorphic bat and hedgehog and robot. I love this franchise. But there you have it. That's a lot of stuff for just over 3 minutes of animation. Really doesn't take too much to really get this fan base hyped up. I know I am. They didn't waste a second of their time here, showing us why Maria is so important to Shadow, helping explain his complex nature by literally explaining it to him, re-establishing the Commander and Team Dark, as well as some surprising deep cuts mixed in there. And of course, the insane animation on display is just delicious. This was fantastic. However long that last part is, it won't be long enough. Hopefully the studio keeps cooking up some amazing projects for this franchise. For the love of God, Sega, hold on to your talent. Part 3 of Dark Beginnings has brought us a conclusion filled with more stunning animation and fans debating the details of Shadow and his abilities, and yeah, what a shock. But we're gonna get into all of it. The good, the bad, and the beautiful. When you add all three of these up together, you don't even get a standard length episode of an anime. Really wish these guys would just put the funding down for a proper 6-episode miniseries set in the Sonic universe, because the biggest problem for any of these Sonic shorts is that they're short. They always leave you wanting more, which is the point. They want you to go play the games, but just once, I'd love if they would just tell the story from start to finish in the same medium. Give me that climax. More like Shadow the Hedgehog, am I right, boys? I'm excited for Shadow Generations, and I know that more animation means more budget, and they probably got away with making these as pretty as they are because they only have a few minutes to work with, but hey, a fan can dream and whine and demand. Welcome to my channel, I do this all the time. But that's saying something when the worst part of it all is that you want more of it. What we have here is overwhelmingly incredible. We have Team Dark once again infiltrating a base, this time run by Gun, with Rouge telling Shadow what he already knows, but in case you haven't played his title game, this is here to catch the audience up and really cement some points down about Shadow's canon. His relationship with Gun, how they funded Project Shadow, and how they locked him away for 50 years. This of course is second nature to a lot of Shadow fans, but this organization has not played a major role for the Sonic franchise for some time. Seriously, you should see how many people were freaking out at set photos for the second Sonic movie. Sonic fans get really excited when they see guns. It's nice to see Sega fully embrace all of this stuff and firmly establish Shadow's view on Gun, which is, as it turns out, pretty neutral these days. He doesn't see them as his enemy, at least not tonight, but rather as an obstacle, as we see yet another boss from his title game arrive on the scene, a Blue Falcon. And as you'd expect by this point, we have some glorious action pop off as soon as there's something new to hit. And I really love the attention to detail with everything. Omega's minigun dancing across the ground, rolling along as it's revving up. You can feel the weight and power that this robot wields, and it's hilarious that he doesn't get to use it at all in this episode, because Shadow pops out and grabs a missile right out of the air, throwing it back at the Blue Falcon, and just to really embarrass that poor bastard, outpaces the missile and grabs it again midair and smacks it into the machine. Someone needs to mod this into Doomsday Zone, like right now. It's funny, but these fights seem to get more and more one-sided in each short. I mean, poor Omega, again, doesn't even get to show off all of those beautiful bullets. And Rouge isn't even involved. And Shadow is just making this robot look like a chump with his own artillery, warping between missiles and finally letting off that iconic chaos control. And somebody else pointed this out on Twitter. I should have screen capped it, I'm so sorry. But another attention to detail, how the emerald just appears in Shadow's hand. I don't need a full game explaining how that works, but I like that they at least acknowledge that the emeralds are in some form absorbed into the person that's wielding their power. Now, if you could do that for the rings, Sega, that'd be super. You know what? I get it when you guys get sick of me talking about classic Shadow or the Freedom Fighters or Mobius. I get it. But the rings? I'm sorry. I got a fight with some of you about rings showing up in Sonic media. Forget it. I'm gonna make a whole video about it. That's just what's gonna happen now. Rings are no compromise. That's Sonic's whole thing. Bring back the rings. I'm so sorry. Why do I have to whine about everything? This cartoon was great. Anyway, yeah, like I was saying, the fights get more one-sided, but God, they look cooler every time. It's just fun watching Shadow just completely decimate this whole man's existence. You got missiles, and he bitch slaps them back into your face. He doesn't even use them to take out the Blue Falcon. He spin dashes through the machine with the camera falling with all of the action. That's fantastic. And not only that, we get that fake out, whatever, we know Shadow will rescue the pilot, but even here, it doesn't feel like an eye-rolling awkward trying to keep it PG moment. It feels like Shadow just really wanting to look this man in the eyes to really understand how outclassed he is by a cartoon hedgehog. Call me edgy, bitch. I dare you. Call me edgy. Call me Shadow the Hedgehog topic. You're gonna look me in my cartoon-ass angry Mickey Mouse eyes and know you will never be better than me. You're a whole-ass human being, and there's not a single human woman that would pick you over me. Ain't nobody gonna remember your face. I'm gonna cause a whole lot of problems in theaters come December. You will gladly watch me kiss your wife on the mouth. Oh, and then there's an attack on a second tower. Anyway, Omega whines about his lack of action. Shadow, not even hiding the parallels to Vegeta and Sasuke and every other anime badass out there, just gives him a just that cocky little without even turning his head. No, I don't care what Izuka says. Don't listen to his lies. This is straight up anime trash. I am here for it. He is the coolest. He told me so. Oh, and he can pilot a rocket. Why not? Just like every other vehicle he approaches, you just press A and you're good to go. I mean, if Knuckles can do it, why not him? Yeah, so rockets taking off, but alarms start blaring. Guns got guns. Who could have guessed? And we got the stupid little dudes from SA2. God, I can never get the gold ones. I gotta go play that game again. I'm not even a fan of SA2. This makes me want to play SA2. This makes me want to play Shadow 05. It's that good. Anyway, guns are everywhere. The robots are everywhere. They're all ready to blast this rocket out of the sky, but it's all stopped by the stern voice of Sonic the Hedgehog using his Chris Redfield voice. Yeah, sorry, just got mixed up there. Roger Craig Smith not only plays Omega in these shorts, but also Gun Commander Abraham Tower. Yes, he says his full name. I don't want anybody else trying to sass me in the comments like I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe his name is just Abe. Shut your dumb mouths. Shut your stupid dumb mouths. This is from Archie. We got all of this because Archie Sonic exists. Thank you, Ian. Mwah. I would let our mustaches touch anyway. His name is Abraham Tower, which was originally from the Archie Sonic series, or maybe it's just another reference to, I really gotta stop making these jokes. I love being an American. I promise. Please don't deport me. I can make that joke. I'm from Paraguay. That's real. I am. I just grew up in Iowa, but I'm from Paraguay. There's some Nick lore for you. What was I talking about? The Blue Falcon crash was an inside job. So, Yeah, I liked all that. But we're not done yet, because here we learn what Rouge was up to on that Eggman base. She was scrounging up info on the Time Eater. And I gotta be honest, this is a much more natural way to tie this short into vanilla Sonic Generations than that awkward birthday party line. But again, I can justify it, and even if I couldn't, I don't hate that it exists. It made me smile. See guys, it's okay to critique a thing and still enjoy it. You're allowed to do that. Who am I fighting with right now? Everyone's usually so nice in the comments. Anyway, there are a couple little notes here that I like. Rouge calls the commander Abe. This could imply that she has dug up a lot of details on the commander. As good of a spy and infiltrator as she is, that would make sense. She might have a good heart, but she always stays 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Another option, or in tandem with that first option, this also implies a more personal connection between these two characters. Maybe the commander likes it when she calls him Abe. I get it, man. I'd get rabies for her. Pup, I know you're editing this video. I know you're madly in love with that bat. I'm just kidding. Besides, you know I'm a ride or die simp monk for life, but you are a dog, so, you know, maybe get tested for rabies. That reminds me, did I ever tell you guys I found a bat in my toilet? True story. Like, just a couple months ago, I came home one night and there was a bat in the toilet. At first, I thought it was like the most wild poop I've ever done, and I forgot to flush it. Like I somehow turned on the bat signal in my bathroom. Bat room. But no, it was a bat, and it was alive. Its little head was still poking up. It was just exhausted, so got it out, and it recovered the next day. True story. I am all over the place today. I really should get tested for rabies. Abe brings up a good point. Despite everything that's happened between him and Shadow, the Hedgehog could have just asked him for help instead of trashing all of his stuff. Costs millions of dollars. And Rouge just smirks, asking, when has Shadow ever asked for permission? I will remind everyone here, this was Rouge's idea to infiltrate the base. They didn't have to do any of this. She could have just called Abe. She's on first name basis with the guy. Could have just asked for the rocket. And Abe, understandably, gets a bit snippy, saying that Rouge could have talked Shadow down. Again, her idea. But she just smiles and says there was only one person that could ever talk Shadow down. This, once again, implies that Rouge really does her research and also is very personally tied to not only Abe here, but also Shadow, because we all know the person she's talking about. Calm down, Twitter. I saw some of you reacting to that in very weird ways. It was not Sonic. Sonic could not talk Shadow down. Here we cut to our closing scene, following the rocket that is taking Shadow back to the place he once called home. And the Hedgehog, alone with his thoughts, flashes to what seems to be more memories of Maria, but we don't get that little indicator implying that this was 50 years ago. We see these two characters sitting by each other, and Maria covering her Hedgehog with a blanket, allowing him something he might not have had for 50 years, a good night's rest. But there's no talking, and this isn't a flashback. This is not the manipulation of Black Doom. This isn't even a memory. These are simply thoughts of what could have been, as we can see with the simple inclusion of lilies, this one little element that implies that these thoughts take place on Earth, showing a future that was robbed from Shadow. He didn't ever want much of anything. He's not imagining a house, not even a bed. He just wants Maria there. Whatever else I had said about 3D models or Kirk's acting, the pain on Shadow's face and the way his voice shakes as he forces those feelings down to focus on the mission is so beautifully done. And with that, we reach the conclusion, with Shadow declaring that something sinister lurks aboard the Ark. Now, there's a lot more to talk about here than I initially thought there was going to be, which is saying something because, again, this video was 5 minutes long, and a minute of that was, once again, credits. Some of this will be a little fun speculation that will probably age badly once the game comes out, so yeah, let's just get this done now. Like I said up front, I do want more of this animation, but I do also really want to play Shadow Generations. It sounds like we're gonna start the game in Space Colony Arc, and then it's going to warp into Radical Highway, which now makes sense narratively, why we go from one place to the other instead of just time warping. So I guess up on the Space Colony is where the Doom Eye is hanging out. There's some connection to the Time Eater, maybe, or maybe Black Doom discovers the Time Eater later in the campaign. I don't know. We'll find out soon enough. But I have to say it one more time. I really, really wish this studio was allowed to play this story out, because I would love to see what they could do in the haunted shell of Space Colony Arc. What a set to play with, and these guys have done nothing but impress the hell out of me. But before I lay on more praise, there is one other thing I need to talk about, and it's something I didn't consider at all while watching this. It only happened after I saw people debating on Twitter, so that's my bad. I really should stay off that site. We all should. And that started with the question, why does Shadow need a rocket to begin with? Because apparently there are a lot of folks out there who just assume that Shadow warped up to Space Colony Arc from Earth in Sonic Adventure 2. I personally never made that assumption myself. I just assumed that he made his way up there by some measure or some other means. It didn't really matter all that much. I mean, yes, we see Team Sonic go to all the trouble of catching onto a rocket, but I just assumed that Eggman had a bunch of other rockets hanging around somewhere, and he had one set up for the rest of his crew. I mean, they had Knuckles flying up to space. I didn't think that was a major deal in terms of how they got there. But when you consider that Sonic used a fake emerald to warp back onto the Ark after he was shot into space, or that Shadow has used emeralds to hop dimensions or travel through time, I certainly understand why fans have made this planet to Ark assumption, because we have seen that Shadow could potentially have the capabilities to do something like that when it comes to chaos control. I do see where everyone's coming from, but I am going to push back on it. I personally don't see this as much of a plot hole for SA2. And even if you do consider it, and it was indeed something Shadow could do, we can point to 06, we can point to Rivals, I get it, but if they were going to do any kind of soft retcons for Sonic lore in 2024, I personally would make firm ground rules on what exactly chaos control can do, because as it stands, I've never honestly been entirely clear on what that ability actually is. It's shown to be both slowing down time and warping within the game it's introduced in. And God, just bringing this up is going to cause an avalanche of essays in the comments. What have I done? And look, I get it. I could write a whole essay on this topic myself, and I might even do that. That sounds like a fun video. And I'm certainly not one to talk down to a fan who gets hung up on this particular detail. What color is that damn fox? Consistency in canon is a big deal to a lot of fans. It's a big deal to me, and it tells us that paying attention matters, and you'll be rewarded for following the story. I get it. And with Dark Beginnings and a lot of media in Sonic currently trying to right the ship, I mean, Frontiers spent the entire game doing just that. I don't blame fans for looking at this particular thing, because chaos control is a big deal. But speaking personally, and this is probably because I never thought chaos control could warp from planet to Arc, and I think the idea is a little ridiculous, I do think this is one particular thing worth letting go. Give you an example to anyone who follows my channel. While I fight so damn hard for Sonic's planet to be named Mobius, I'm not gonna have it ruin my day if they have decided on Earth. They clearly have. I'm still gonna have a great time running around on loop-de-loops of Earth. There have been other fictional Earths. I'm gonna be just fine. Honestly, I'm just glad that they finally have the confidence to settle on something to tell us that paying attention is going to matter, even if there are a lot of inconsistencies in the past, because let's be real, there are a lot of inconsistencies within the main game canon. What color is Tails? The games have given me 3 answers. And chaos control is a bit all over the place. Even if it's used as straight up teleportation, I do think it's a little wild to cover that vast of a distance with the ability, at least with only 1 or 2 emeralds. If Shadow was in a super form, sure. I like the idea of chaos control being elevated when he's in a super form, as we saw at the end of SA2. I know I can be very particular about what details of lore matter to me, but honestly, I kind of feel Shadow's earlier abilities were either overblown or broken to the point where you don't really have room for fun. I get it, Shadow fans, he can teleport off planet and cure AIDS, real cool, but if he can do everything, that leaves room for nothing in terms of stakes or drama. It becomes the very problem everybody seems to have with Superman. I personally think that chaos control being able to slow down time or warping over short distances is plenty cool on its own, and Shadow's other abilities that allow him to chaos blast or whatever the hell you want to call his energy attacks, that's awesome. Makes for kick-ass anime fight scenes, but I really don't want the guy to instant transmission all over the place. I feel like that's such a broken power in DBZ. Let's not copy everything from that series. Now, that's just my my opinion. Whether or not he can actually do it, well, I'm gonna leave that up to you in the comments, because I'm sure I'm getting a lot of people fired up as it is. I'm just bringing it up because this is a hot topic I've been seeing surrounding this, and I feel like people are getting so caught up with this kind of stuff that it's kind of killing the whole point of enjoying things like Dark Beginnings to begin with. And quite frankly, there are enough people in this fan base that just hate on Ian Flynn for stupid reasons as it is. I really don't think getting hung up on this kind of crap just to point out how much of a hack writer he is does anybody any good. I'm a fan of his work. I don't agree with every choice he makes, but I deeply respect him as a person and I admire his skill. And I'm very, very thankful somebody this talented is working on this franchise. And not just talented, but clearly loves these characters too. I've made that pretty clear in speed reading time and time again, but I'm gonna keep reiterating because I keep seeing that vitriol in this fan base and I'm just sick of it. Call me a fanboy, call me Kiss S, I don't care. I've spent so much time getting bent out of shape over the Knuckles show or this or that and the other. I'm not even a fan of the games that this short is referencing, but there is so much passion and talent on display here. How can you not be excited for this? How could you not love this? How could you be so caught up on stupid nonsense not to see the incredible work on display here? The fight scenes, these beautiful emotional beats. We got people complaining for years on end that Shadow's been mischaracterized, and you're gonna be upset that he can't just jump straight to the moon? Grow up. I know that's not most people, but man, I'm getting sick and tired of the haters. Done with it. Am I a hypocrite? Yes, I hate Wade Whipple. I'm sorry. Love what you love. I'm never gonna punch you in the face for it. Please say hi to me at Sonic Expo. Critiques are important. That's my entire job. But don't let them take away from something truly special. We have seen Maria's death played out to the point where it's a joke, hashtag cap that kid. But here, we actually see the effect her death had on Shadow. I joke about whether or not they're gonna shoot a kid in a movie, but that's not what actually matters. What matters is the emotional resonance from this traumatic event. And this short showed us exactly that. I think this is where the team really stepped up in terms of analyzing and taking from the source material. This whole bit of animation firmly reestablishes the canon of Shadow's game, and without needing to revisit awkward old graphics or localization, this tells you just about everything someone new would need to know about the Black Arms, Gun, Team Dark, Shadow the Hedgehog, and Maria, while leaving enough there to make you ask for more. And at the same time, it recontextualizes certain elements from those old games for older fans. My buddy Channel Pup pointed this out in his analysis, but the way Maria tackle hugs Shadow is not dissimilar to the way Amy tackle hugs Shadow in SA2. Pup, I'm so jealous that you caught that. That is such a cool little detail, and there is no way I'm gonna believe that was an accident. This is why I appreciate Flynn and the rest of the team. They not only told a good story in its own right, but if that was indeed an intentional choice, they kind of made the narrative of Sonic Adventure 2 a little stronger. It doubled down on Amy reminding Shadow of Maria, helping him come back from the brink at the end of the game. When I first played that game all those years ago, I thought it was so random, but it was all there in the game, and Dark Beginnings just further cements that without over-explaining things like I'm doing right now. And this final scene of Dark Beginnings solves a problem I have seen fans debate about over and over again: the localization of Shadow's end scene of his title game. In Dark Beginnings, it shows us it doesn't really matter how you interpret it, be it the English track or the original Japanese, because now it can be seen as Shadow still taking a genuine turn in his path of healing and making his own choices to be a good person and live a full life instead of living in the past. It shows us there was indeed growth from that game, but at the same time, that doesn't suddenly mean you no longer feel waves of heartache and sadness. Trauma stays with you forever. As long as you live, some hits never go away. You just learn to live with. And sometimes in those quiet moments, or when you're in a situation that forces you to face that trauma, it can overwhelm. No matter how much you say you're over it, or you moved on, you've grown beyond it, every now and then it will come back to haunt you because it's a part of you. And here, in this moment on the rocket, we see a Shadow on the verge of a breakdown. But instead of tears, he shakes it off, forcing himself to stay in the moment. Be in the present. However you interpret the end of Shadow the Hedgehog, you can now look at it with this fresh perspective. And whether this is a healthy coping mechanism or not it doesn't actually matter. Sometimes this is just what you have to do to make it through the day. Sometimes this is what you have to do to survive. And no, I don't see this as a regression in character. This is quite possibly the most honest look at the heart of Shadow the Hedgehog I have ever seen expressed in this series. Keanu, you got your work cut out for you in December. And of course, it wouldn't be an anime if they didn't have some spoken word music slapped on at the end there. And yes, I know I've been an outspoken hater on this kind of stuff. I don't listen to the Persona 5 soundtrack. I'm sorry. I don't like the end track of Frontiers, at least Vanilla Frontiers, but alright, I gotta admit it. Without You by Casey Lee Williams is pretty damn good. And again, this is some anime-ass Sonic content here. It fits very perfectly. It would be weird if this wasn't here. And I am gonna give them props for producing this song simply for this scene. And if you couldn't hear what she was saying during that scene, just to really nail it on the head here, these are the lyrics from the episode. Can you hear me? Do you still hear my voice? Echoes back at me, why did you make that choice? You surround me, and your memory is clouded by all things dark. I can't feel you there. You'll never leave me, I swear. It's just a nightmare that won't end. So I pretend that I'll see you again, and I'll save you from all the things I failed to do. Now I'm without you. I can't forgive the wrongs I've done, because now you're gone forever. I remember how bright you shined on your own, yet I remain alone. I know I've been all over the place emotionally in this video, but I hope it goes to show you just how powerful animation can be. This isn't good simply as Sonic content. This is just good animation. It's good storytelling, had cute little moments of humor here and there. It didn't feel forced in or awkward. It was very cute and perfect for the moments that needed it. Birthday line aside, I do, again, think that was a little awkward, but again, it's not a Marvel movie. Nowhere near as bad as some of those jokes. The action was intense, and the emotional moments, again, well, anime cliche was really good cliche. This was inspired. This isn't simply copying other franchises or animes or anything like that, which, let's be real, is in Sonic's wheelhouse. But this is clearly made not only with love for Shadow the Hedgehog, but a love for the craft that everyone was there to do. I feel like everybody working on this loved the job that they were doing. It's been heartwarming following some of these creators on social media. Ian Flynn said that writing this stuff made him well up. Some of these animators were so excited to finally talk about working on this project, a promotional anime teaser for a Sonic the Hedgehog re-release. And I've heard that the studio has also worked on recent Ninja Turtle animation projects, and I really gotta get that second channel started. Oh my god. Say what you want about more recent Turtles, but everything that's been coming out has been done with a lot of love and care, and it shows. And seeing that kind of passion and love make its way over to Sonic the Hedgehog, buddy, I'm eating good these days. This little animated short promoting a game that's made to promote a movie. This right here gave it its all. It left nothing on the table. This team had an opportunity to do something special, and they ran with it. This cartoon looked back at the darkest chapter of Sonic's history and told everyone not to be afraid of the dark. Okay, so before we wrap everything up, I wanted to take a look back at everything now that we have the entire story of Shadow Generations to give us the rest of Dark Beginning's story. And not only that, we also have a couple extra scenes that were added later on after this was all combined together, and we have the full animatic as well that had some expanded and slightly reworked sections of the script. Now, there's not much else here when it's all said and done, but all of it is welcome, and some things did answer some speculation I had when I was first watching these shorts week to week, and to probably nobody's surprise, I definitely was overanalyzing a few things. Starting with part 1, once the Gizoid attacks, Shadow was originally going to pick up Maria and race her down the hall to safety, only to be blocked off by a blast door. And while all this was happening, Shadow would look out the window to see more of the Ark explode in the wake of the attack. Shadow would leave Maria by the blast door that seems to be right outside of Gerald's lab, and from there he would be grabbed by Maria, kicking off the weird jumble of memory. Now, this would have been a cool set piece, but it was entirely unnecessary since Shadow had to leave Maria behind either way, and while I know Maria hugged him and grabbed him in other spots of the scene, I did think it was weird that Shadow was in contact with her that whole time, and only now she grabs him and that kicks off the memories. Whatever, that wasn't the important thing. We missed out on a little more eye candy, but I do think the final piece works way better. There are some other things here and there, but the next big piece I wanted to mention was that whole silly birthday negotiation I was complaining about. There's more of a conversation between Rouge and Shadow in the animatic, with Rouge actually explaining why she wants Shadow to join her at Sonic's birthday, and it's mostly to make both hedgehogs uncomfortable. understandable. And honestly, this was just a bit too much explaining than what was necessary. Yes, we did miss out on another Omega line, but I can see why this was cut. Still, like I said, I was asking questions about it, so it was nice to have that curiosity satiated once I watched this. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and probably the most interesting stuff, was all in Chapter 3, starting with Wee Baby Tower. Abe originally was not meant to appear in the second chapter. Instead, he would have appeared in a flashback that kicked off Part 3, which references some Sonic Channel art that showed off some life on the Ark, with Maria and Shadow partaking in class. We see that classroom in this animatic, and Abe is having some trouble with some kind of problem. Shadow just scoffs at him, saying it's super easy, and the future commander snaps back at him, calling him a monster. And Maria, of course, acts as the peacekeeper, saying that she hopes they all can hang out once they're on Earth. Again, it's nice to see why there was some beef between Abe and Shadow, but speaking plainly, I do think it's a little pathetic to have Shadow just standing next to a wall in a classroom talking crap to a kid. Yes, it would have expanded a little bit more on the issues between Abe and Shadow, as I did initially ask why Abe was running out of the room Shadow was in. Ultimately, I didn't actually care. It was just there to establish that there was some beef between the two. And having Abe look in on the conversation between Maria and Shadow showed that no matter what Abe calls Shadow, he does at least hear the words that Maria says to the hedgehog. You know, about having a big heart despite having a hard time expressing himself, all that cute crap. And outside of it just looking a bit too silly, having Shadow be a classroom bully, I do also think this was a little bit too on the nose, with Maria hoping they'll all be buddy-buddy even though we already know she's a corpse. We didn't need 2 reminders that Maria wanted Shadow to have a happy life on Earth. But there were some other cool things in Part 3 that we missed out on. Like other spots here and there in the animatic, they definitely had intended for some more action to take place, but I imagine if not for time, then at least for budgetary reasons, they probably cut some things. For instance, that opening chat between Team Dark in Part 3 now takes place as they rush towards the gun base instead of already being on the gun base and on the elevator leading up to the launch controls. That reveal of the base would have been a little bit cooler in my opinion, but I understand why they just skipped that. And the fight against the Blue Falcon was also expanded on a bit. Shadow calls it out by name. We didn't really need that. Cutting out that little bit just made it cooler for fans who were in the know. And a lot of fans already complain about the show versus tell references that happen between Shadow Generations and Sonic Frontiers. So just showing the Blue Falcon was the better move. And for a second there, I thought it was just the model taken out from Shadow 05, but I don't think that's how it actually works. It's just a lower poly model for the animatic. Still, it was cute to see it here. And there were going to be some more flashy moments in the fight, with Shadow really flexing those chaos powers. It is a shame we missed that, but I'm glad to have seen the original vision. The ending was also slightly different. Well, not really all that different. It was just expanded on a little bit more than I think was necessary, with a little more exposition from Shadow on the rocket, and we get that Maria flashback on Earth that did end up becoming fully animated and was left as an after credits, at least in the PlayStation version. And of course, the new ending teasing the return of Black Doom is also here. And once again, I was overthinking everything. As it turns out, the larva we saw on board the Ark earlier on in Dark Beginnings would eventually grow into a new Doom. Had nothing to do with a Time Eater as I initially thought. I don't know if that is missed potential or not. We'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about the story of Shadow Generations when I cover Shadow Generations. But as it is, I do like the idea of the larva being able to grow into a new Black Doom. That makes the character far more dangerous than he was originally presented to be. And for the sake of this story and this animation, it all comes together quite nicely without having to over-explain too many things. The Time Eater, after all, is part of a story that didn't initially have all this stuff for Shadow, so not tying things together too much to making it too messy makes sense to me. And overall, I do think the final ending works way better than what we see in the animatic. I'm very glad that final scene between Shadow and Maria was left as an after credits thing versus the original idea of having it play out while Shadow was aboard the rocket. On its own, it's another beautiful yet sad scene, but when it's mixed in with Shadow reminiscing, it's just a little bit too on the nose for me. It's a bit too much. It's a bit too melodramatic. So yeah, ultimately, a lot of the things we saw here, I understand why they were cut, and I'm thankful a lot of this stuff was cut, because I do think that some of these scenes played out much better in the final product. But all that said, I do appreciate the clarification here and there, even if most of this stuff was kind of pointless. But all the same, these were questions I was asking when I was initially watching this animation. And not only was this cool to see in terms of a behind the scenes and process of making animation kind of way, but it's also cool to see that whatever I was asking questions about, Ian was already thinking about while he was writing the story. And yes, while these extra scenes and animatics aren't entirely necessary, for someone someone like me and a lot of fans who look way too deep into this stuff, packing it all away in an animatic and having that available for you to see on the game disc as well as the prologue itself is the perfect spot for it. And I am thankful that the prologue is available with the game. That's something we've always complained about. You make these beautiful animations, but you don't include them with the game? That didn't make any kind of sense. Yeah, you can watch this stuff on YouTube, but hey, sometimes you just want a full complete package. And while both Dark Beginnings and Shadow Generation stand on their own, they do work much better once you have experienced both. So yeah, all my initial thoughts, how I felt about Dark Beginnings, all of that still stands. Again, I do appreciate the clarification. I can't believe I had to watch an animatic and the final animation like twice over before I finally realized that that initial memory was indeed just a nightmare being influenced by Black Doom from the Ark. I really thought it was messing with like time travel powers or some nonsense like that. Not the case whatsoever. But all that said, all this is really good. The extra stuff is fun if you care as deeply as you probably do if you're watching a video about this stuff. And yes, obviously I love Shadow Generations. That was a fantastic game, and I will be talking about it very soon, so be sure you subscribe if you haven't already. But that is going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and an extra special thank you to the folks who help support me over on Patreon. And that includes Kyle Winter, Cirrus the Skeptic, Joseph Duncan, Sonic 2 Blue, Josh Strider, Trey Nobles, Hatsworth, Tiny Jericho, Ginger Bob, Jack of All Spades, Tristan Trapp, Meekers, Bo Bennings, quote, Resident Fanboy, Miles the Prower, Singer J199, Sam Webster, Fish Flop, Lucas Lipker, The Bad Pal, Jonathan Dobbs, Clover Chats, Chad, Mr. SP, Cecil the Glade, The Dark Neon, Stefan Platonica, 3 Monic, Graham J. Hall, Lenny X, Wayne is Boss, Letteric, David 20 Covers, Trash Baphomet, Enerjack 5, Grayson Coniger, Xerxes the Renegade Jin, Ken K, Ven 101, Paxton Bisbee, Sindarin 7, Bunny, Twilord. Did you know this entire video was AI generated? Crimson Rose, Roxas the Cat, Godzilla, Makuta of Salt, Gleam the Anomaly, Alexander Watson, Neil Gampa, Conan Kudo, the Lex the most powerful ship in the 2 universes, Kaido Prower, Spearmint, Duo the Cat, Omega Man 21, Pen Adelaide, Daza S, the world's most unironic 8.5 tail stand, One More Sonic Robot, MT Mecha, Gob, the RSI, Captain Sebenzal, survivors were picked up by RMS Nux, Salem Hollow, Siegfried Wilder, the Burnyard, KB, Tenric Terror, and Cho Henshin. Guys, thank you again so much for your support. And hey, if you catch this video before Sonic Expo, November 7th through the 10th in Dallas, Texas, and you have the means to get there, be sure you get there. I'm going to be in a couple of panels. I'll be doing meet and greets. It's going to be a great weekend. Come see me. Come see a bunch of other Sonic content creators, some voice actors and artists, and it's just going to be a great time. But until next time, toot toot, Shadow Warriors.